can't be the only one who has noticed the growing prevalence of the trad movement on the left, such as it is on the socialist left. This growing tendency towards, socially conservative values and culture. And I think it's a very interesting phenomenon that it's difficult to just condemn it outright. I think there's a very fine line that we need to tread here, and just like most things, the correct line is found in a kind of dialectical balance between the two opposing poles here. So I am not an advocate for like extreme libertinism and kind of like decadence or something of that sort. I don't think that necessarily everybody should be, a pansexual, polyamorous, non-binary, whatever. I think, at some point, like many generations down the line, society will move towards some kind of like a greater acceptance of fluidity like that. But I don't, think that everybody in this day and age needs to, be that, fluid. But at the same time, I think that it is, personally quite alarming that there's this growing movement towards, traditional values and, again, social conservatism. I think, what does it speak of? What does it indicate? It indicates, an increasing nihilism, in my view, within like the millennial generation. I mean, it's just very understandable. Like, to me, it is like very clear that the lack of prospects, especially of familiar prospects, and the lack of any real future for the millennial generation as well as the younger generation, it kind of makes it very understandable why socialists, leftists nominally, would feel inclined to move towards this kind of like a more conservative and traditional set of values. But the problem is that nothing in the past ever really worked. There's no real workable model in the past, and that kind of movement is like pure reactionaryism. Like, there's nothing more to it. Like in past socialist revolutions, they were marked by like a great expansion of these kinds of cultures around like sexual relationships and like gender normativity and heteronormativity. In the USSR, they made like the most sudden gains in, or like the most sudden development of the status of women in society that has ever occurred in any modern society. And like there was a lot of work done in both Russia and China to break down the structure of the nuclear family and to communize, these kinds of social units. So why is it that in the past, when we are not marked by such a like cloud of nihilism as we are now, why is it that in those socialist movements there was like a great optimism and a kind of desire to like build new structures and to move forward into the great unknown, whereas now, all that the socialist left can imagine, all that they can hope for, is a return to some kind of fantasy that existed in the past. I mean, like it is just very clearly to me, a reactionary symptom, and it's hard to condemn because I totally understand and sympathize with it. Like, you can't just condemn these kinds of things. You have to empathize with them and see that they indicate that they speak to a real systemic cause, and we're not out to condemn individuals for trying to live out here we're out to condemn, like social structures that make life unlivable for individuals. So I just wanted to, bring up this topic of the growing prevalence of this trad movement on the left, and it's marked by this phenomenon of basedness. I think that meme has something to do with it, and this kind of dissolution of the boundaries between left and right. I know a lot of people out there think those are archaic terms. I mean, they mean something when you're talking about politics, but it's really interesting to think about where those two like cultural movements, progressive and reactionary, begin to overlap. Horseshoe theory is not true in a political sense, but it is very true in a cultural sense. Like right-wing reactionary people, I have experienced, and I'm sure you have as well, being spoken to in a way that is compelling by a reactionary figure, a crypto-fascist. They express a lot of truths for leftists as well. The problem is that their solutions are not correct. But even while perhaps their diagnoses may be correct, it's pretty easy for even a reactionary to read Marx and be able to understand that capitalism is not a good thing, and to advocate for some other, generally crypto-fascists kind of just completely occlude what their economic policies might be, because then you like lose the crypto and are out yourself as being purely fascist. But I just think it's very interesting that there's like this very particular realm of discourse where, like, especially is very relevant for the millennial generation and the Zoomer generation. But basically, like, culture begins to overlap, and you kind of lose the boundaries between, or lose the boundary between, those two different forces of reactionary and progressive. And I think again, like, horseshoe theory is not a real thing. Like, politically speaking, and economically speaking, there's like a real difference between like communism and fascism, taken to be like the two poles of these of this horseshoe or whatever, of the left and right. So I don't think it is like a real phenomenon that those two overlap politically, but culturally, absolutely. And it is just completely unhealthy and not good for anybody, for any kind of movement, for leftists to pretend as though that is not true. So I hope to speak more on this in a future video, but until then, I'll see you.